What's up? Welcome into the latest episode of Pod Like a Champion, the blueandgold.com recruiting podcast. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by our recruiting insider, Mike Singer. It is late signing day eve, Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. And I don't know, Mike, I don't know about you, but I kind of miss the hecticness of the late or the February period when it was the only signing period. Just when you had all this crazy stuff in late January where you had like committed guys scheduling official visits to other places and coaches running around doing in-homes. And I mean, it was nothing if not fun to follow, but early signing period kind of took the juice out of that a little bit, didn't it?
Yes, I agree with you. From a selfish standpoint, I very much prefer the two signing periods. But yeah, I mean, just thinking back to before, you had December was all of the in-home visits would start. Then January, you had 3 or 4 official visit weekends. Now it's much more tame. Late here in the process, and there's only like a dozen big name guys across the country that are still out there making their decisions, and Notre Dame still has one that we'll be talking about here in a minute.
Yeah, it's not like some of that stuff doesn't still happen, but it's just decreased it by 80%. And that, of course, is in a normal year, not in this year where none of those in homes or officials or anything is happening. But yes, let's touch on what to expect for Notre Dame. But first, I want to make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast if you're listening on the podcast form on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hit that thumbs up button on this video. We'd really appreciate it. And of course, to our podcast audience, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating, leave us a review. And we want to take a minute to plug our special edition, or I guess it's not special because it's every year, but bigger edition of Blue and Gold Illustrated magazine, the recruiting edition, 84 pager going over this entire signing class, plus a lot more. And as always, follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _, that's ENGEL. And you can follow Mike at rivals _singer and get 2 free months to blueandgold.com with the promo code Irish60. That's Irish60. All right, Mike. So, tame signing day, or what we expect to be a tame signing day. And I don't want to say anything with certainty here. We're talking about recruiting after all. But what to watch here on Wednesday, February 3rd, as we're recording this now on Tuesday morning, as far as what's expected or things afoot for Notre Dame on that late signing period tomorrow.
So I want to preface this by saying you always could have some surprise because there's Ron Paulus we didn't expect. Kari G came out of left field in December. Both of those guys you weren't expecting until that week. And even in Paulus' case that morning, even though that was kind of in Notre Dame's plans all along. But so I want to mention Notre Dame might be keeping something a secret that some of us in the media don't know about or aren't reporting. So we'll see. But the big name is Logan Diggs. There's a lot to talk about here that we'll be able to discuss even more so after it's all kind of done. Like once the dust is settled, we'll be able to give some more details. Because this one is I mean, I've been covering recruiting for almost a decade, and this is up there with one of the strangest recruitments I've ever covered. And again, we'll be able to get into all those details on blueandgold.com. So make sure you become a premium subscriber and use that promo code Irish60. It's a great time to do so. But kind of the short on Diggs is that he committed to Notre Dame last July. Was fairly solid throughout the fall with, but also was saying, I can't I can't sign with the school without having visited. And it looked like for a while that he was not going to visit Notre Dame before signing. And then he was able to visit Notre Dame in December. And then a few days after he visited, he gets an LSU offer. And that LSU offer came exactly a week before the December 16th National Signing Day. So then it's like a Notre Dame LSU, which one's he going to do? Notre Dame signs Audric Estime, which, Logan Diggs, when he committed, thought he was going to be the only running back in the class. But then, at Notre Dame, you have Jameer Smith enter the transfer portal, and Jafar Armstrong just wasn't working out a running back. So Notre Dame needed to take 2 running backs in this class. So they go after an Audric Estime. So Logan Diggs didn't love that, but then at the same time, LSU signed 2 running backs, so Logan Diggs would be a third running back there. So it's just kind of an interesting situation between LSU, which is, of course, the home state school. And then in January, you have Terry Joseph leaving Notre Dame. So Diggs did not announce a signing in December. You have Terry Joseph leaving, and Terry Joseph, a New Orleans native, um, uh, close to Diggs. They built a really strong relationship when Diggs committed in July. Um, Diggs spoke about Joseph being a key part of his recruitment. Of course, Lance Taylor was Notre Dame's running backs coach, is very involved in the recruitment, but Joseph played a huge role as well. So Joseph leaves Notre Dame's coaching staff for Texas, and Diggs wasn't too happy. So it's kind of just been this ever since Diggs really committed a back and forth kind of thing. Will he? Won't he? It's been a wild one. So Rivals reported that he will be announcing his decision Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. So I can't even guarantee that Logan Diggs will announce then. Like, I'm not. Everything is on the table. Like, so I can't guarantee that he would even follow through and announce what he's going to do. So we're just going to have to see. I say that all the time with the recruiting. Nothing is ever set in stone, but for this one, it's very much day to day, hour to hour. So we're recording this, Tuesday at 11:30 Eastern. Like, by the time this hits your feeds and you're listening to it, I don't know if things will be different. So make sure you lock into blueandgold.com.
So I mean, one, this is just like welcome to recruiting, right? It's twists and turns. But two, I guess I want to say this in regards to Diggs. And look, I know we don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to speak in absolutes or assumptions here, but if let's say Diggs picks LSU and the we didn't want him anyway, spin committee, whatever, all that stuff kind of comes out, like I'm sure Notre Dame will be just fine in going to 2022, grabbing 2 backs if it wants to, or hitting the portal, or whatever option it wants there. And especially as we've talked about in previous podcasts, Mike, you have to like where they are with a few 2022 targets. But that said, like Logan Diggs was one of the first, if not the first, players they offered after Will Shipley committed to Clemson. Maybe the last time we mentioned Will Shipley on this podcast.
Nope,
No
but
promises still.
we'll mention Will Shipley a
and
few more times.
and then, like you said, they needed, or at least decided they really wanted to take a second back in this class, just from numbers working out like they did with the situations you mentioned, or thought it'd be better to take 2 in 2021 than 2022. Like at one point, if not still the case, like that's true. So when you look at it that way, like it is a loss, and this wasn't like someone where the fans can say like we didn't want him anyway. No, like again, you look at when the offer came in and how he was identified as a priority when one of their other top targets went elsewhere. So I mean, you look at that, like yeah, this is someone they wanted to have in the class, and if he now, at least as it stands, there's a chance that that's not the case. And look, you can say that just based on the fact that he's having some kind of announcement on signing day, where clearly it's not a thing where he's saying, "Hey, this is my signing ceremony. I'm signing with Notre Dame." But I digress and won't spend too much time on that. Basically, just to say, like, in the grand scheme of things, I think Notre Dame will be fine, both when you look at the 2020 backfield and whatever it decides to do with hitting running back numbers or taking a second back in the next class. But to act like this was something, it's like, hey, like we're cool because it was never that big a deal to us, I don't really think is the right way to look at it, if indeed he does go to LSU.
Yeah, we didn't want him crowd anyway. I don't think that is going to be too prevalent. I think it's more of this coaching staff doesn't know what they're doing, like just from the fan standpoint, or the fan standpoint of view. I would even a couple things I want to mention. if he goes to LSU, the chances of Kevin Falk, their running backs coach, being there all 4 or 5 years is small. I mean, coaches just leave. I mean, if I could give recruits and parents just one bit of advice, it is don't go to a school with the main point being a coach, because they just don't stay there. I mean, Mike Elston and Brian Polian being at Notre Dame, I mean, Polian, of course, was the Nevada head coach, so he came back, but still, I mean, he was coaching at Notre Dame, in the Manti Te'o era, back then, Charlie Weiss. So they just don't coach that long. I mean, Mike Elston being here for 10, 11 years, that just doesn't happen. He's like a lifer. Jeff Quinn has been at Notre Dame for a while, and how he's been with Brian Kelly for so long. So that just doesn't happen. So that's just kind of me on my soapbox. And you touched on this, Patrick. Yeah, it's a loss. Again, if Logan Diggs goes to LSU, it would be a loss because they wanted him. Yes, he's a good, talented player. But I would make a strong argument that the 2021 backfield is in a much better place than the 2020 backfield was for Notre Dame. Not only because you have Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree a year older, a year better, bigger, faster, stronger. You also bring back Sibo Flemister, who is a guy that we had been saying for months is like, look, when your best two running backs are your youngest two running backs, those old guys might transfer, right? Jafar Armstrong, Jameer Smith have since transferred. Jafar Armstrong, where did he land at?
Illinois.
Illinois, and then Jameer Smith, Appalachian State, returned to his home state. So yeah, you're like looking at Sibo. Could he, be next? But no, I think he seems to be locked in. And I mean, he has to know that he's probably not busting into the top two back rotation. He's going to be the number 3 guy. And then Audric Estime had a very good senior season. So if he's your 4th running back, that's a very good situation to have. So then you would be looking at, if Diggs does sign with Notre Dame, probably Diggs or Estime your 4th and 5th back. So for the short term, it's okay. In 2022, just go get a couple backs or maybe get one back in a grad transfer. So, yeah, I think they're in a good spot. Yeah, obviously you'd rather have Logan Diggs, but it's going to be okay at the end of the day.
Yeah, from a 2021 depth chart standpoint, not bringing Diggs in the class would be very survivable. And honestly, I guess you would say the same thing if it was Diggs in the class and Audric Estime
Yes,
not in the class.
that's a good point to make.
Just looking at it as one running back, just because of the reasons you outlined, the top 3 are established and very good. It'd be more of a thing for, all right, a rash of injuries comes in and for 2022 and down the road. And in that same vein, I wouldn't really see much upside in taking a grad transfer running back for this upcoming year, just because of, all right, what's the playing time potential? Like, what's the depth really there for? Like, it'd have to be someone like a Trevor Spates type of guy who comes in okay with possibly being that depth situation. But then, like, I don't know, what are you asking for? Like, replicate Sibo Flemister? Well, why do you want to do that when you already have Sibo Flemister on the roster and he had a good season as a number 3? But yeah, that's kind of getting too far into the weeds there. But basically, yeah, Logan Diggs, your last signing day suspense or storyline to follow on this late signing period. As it stands now, knock on wood, no guarantees because recruiting.
And you also have Kendall Abdul-Rahman too. He's cross-trained a couple of positions. Right. So in an emergency, you have him. So yeah, it's going to be okay.
All right, let's move on. We just talked briefly on the transfer portal, but going beyond running back, what names do you see, Mike, as Notre Dame kind of looking at in the portal, or looking at it in a serious way? Where does that stand right now as far as names Notre Dame is really considering making a run at to bring in here?
Yeah, so we get this a lot. Comment section in our YouTube videos is like, all right, Mike, who are we bringing in the transfer portal? And of course, transfer portal stuff moves like that. I mean, you think recruiting can move fast. Transfer portal stuff, like, these guys aren't playing games. Like, they have an opportunity. They want to pop. So I first want to mention positions to keep an eye on. Um, is the ones that you just had, like a senior leave and you have question marks behind there. So like Ian Book, um, you know, going to the NFL, you return 0 starts at quarterback. So it made a lot of sense bringing in Jack Cohn. I think you have a ton of talent at receiver, with Kevin Austin, Jordan Johnson, Braden Lenzy, Xavier Watts, Joe Wilkins. The list goes on and on. You bring in 3 talented freshmen as well, but none of them are very proven at this point, right? So I think it would make sense to bring in someone like Ben Skoranek, like you did, and now he's gone. So to you lose Skoranek, you lose McKinley. So I think that would make sense. Um, I also think you look at edge rusher potentially with what you lose there. Defensive back help. I mean, Notre Dame could really use that moving forward. Whether it's safety next to Kyle Hamilton, corner. Look, they brought in Nick McLeod. He did a fine job as a stopgap. Well, they need another stopgap corner, in my opinion. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. So there's like positional needs, but then there's always best available. So the guy we're going to talk about next, I think, is might be one of the best available players in the transfer portal, and that's Mike Jones from Clemson. 6 foot, 220 pounds from the Nashville area. So I don't think that inside linebacker is necessarily a need, because you have some experienced guys returning. But if like Marcus Freeman likes him enough, and sees him fitting in his defense and all that good stuff, then I can see this happening, and I can report that Notre Dame's been in contact with Mike Jones Jr. I don't know who else that he's also considering, but I do know that Notre Dame is very much in the mix. So Patrick, like we don't know exactly right now, know what Marcus Freeman's defense is going to look like. Like we'll mention, is this Rover, and like, hey, the Rover position might not be a thing anymore, guys. We have a whole new defense coordinator. But where would you? I mean, would you like this take for Notre Dame?
Yeah, I would. And if it's a rover spot he ends up being in, I think it works. You saw him play a few different spots at Clemson last year, where here's what the research team has found on his usage in 2020: 78 snaps as what you would call the defensive line, or in a defensive line alignment, 134 in the box, so closest to off-ball linebacker, will linebacker, Mike linebacker, whatever terms the Clemson defense uses for that. Use Notre Dame's there. And then 139 snaps in what you would call or what Pro Football Focus identifies as a slot corner. So
Kind of
that
Rover.
might be box safety, rover, like you said. So yeah, I think when you look at the versatility and just different spots you can put him in, I think it would make a lot of sense. And especially when you look at, all right, if Marcus Freeman wants to use that 3-3-5 with some frequency, I think you can look at Mike Jones as a pretty good fit as a nickel defender, as perhaps that third linebacker in there where you're asking him to go cover in the slot. Or if it is, the 4-down front, which I think we're going to see a lot of, even if you just take Brian Kelly at his word of we're not going to be 3 down when he says that, then I think you can look at Jones as fitting as a 4-3 linebacker, or rover, if you still want to call that a linebacker, but more of a 4-2-5 as that fifth hybrid or whatever. So yeah, I think he gives you some different options and uses, and I think we'll see a lot of multiple fronts and versatility from Freeman's defense. So to me, it makes a lot of sense as a best available.
Yeah, I would like it. I mean, I got bring in the Clemson dudes. Why not?
So let's touch on 2022 recruiting. I think we've covered the biggest storyline of 2021 that's left for now, unless we get hit with a surprise, we'll see. But Notre Dame's 2022 class, Mike, you put in a FutureCast for a 2022 defensive end to land with Notre Dame. Why don't you fill us in on who that is and what you see going down in that recruitment?
Yeah, he's actually on campus right now as we're recording this podcast episode. It's Aiden Gobera from Chantilly, Virginia, in the Washington, D.C. area. For our YouTube audience, you see that FutureCast says 75% in favor of Penn State. That's rivals, analysts, and team site members putting those picks in. So those 3 picks went in for Penn State last fall, and then you have the one for Notre Dame, which was me on Monday night. Um, yeah, Penn State's been the leader for a while, but Notre Dame's made a really strong surge here recently, um, with Marcus Freeman, Mike Elston, defensive line coach, even defensive line assistant. I guess you would call him the assistant to the defensive line coach, maybe, Patrick.
Assistant defensive line coach.
Yeah, so that's Mike Ojwin, who came over from Texas Tech, SMU grad. Shout out Ponies.
That's right.
So yeah, Aiden Gobera on campus as we speak. We're still in this dead period, so he can't meet the coaches, tour the facilities, all that stuff. But just like anyone can go to campus right now and just walk around, that's what Aiden's doing right now. So he's on campus with his mom and his high school head coach. So that makes it seem okay. He brought his coach along, makes it seem pretty serious. So sources on the Notre Dame side of the recruitment have indicated that Notre Dame might be the leader here. So in terms of a timeline, I wrote a story on Tuesday morning. You can find that on blueandgold.com or on Gobert. But I added in that story that, like, I'm not ruling out a commitment this week, but from what he had told me recently, he was looking to stretch it out a little bit longer. But I mean, Aiden Gobera, 6'6", 230. Patrick, I mean, Notre Dame's doing pretty well recruiting in the trenches. You already have 2 offensive line commitments. Rivals 250 4-star players, and Joey Tenona, in-state kid from Zionsville, and then Ty Chan in Massachusetts. And then you landed Tyson Ford a couple weeks ago, and then if you get Aiden Gobera, I mean that's a pretty solid start here to the defensive line recruiting.
Yeah, another guy that Notre Dame offered way back in the spring, well before Marcus Freeman had gotten here, but certainly one that Freeman had identified as a kid he liked and wanted to pursue, and seemingly he has helped out Notre Dame there. And because this podcast just has endless ties to Will Shipley, of
Oh, God.
course, Notre Dame offered
What?
Aiden Gobera on May
Same
5th,
day.
2020.
Yeah.
You guys know what happened on that day. I don't need to even say it. So, but anyway, that's encouraging news for Notre Dame there with her pursuit of Gobera. But we know what you guys really want to know about 2022, just considering on the questions we got when we took your questions last week, and that's what's happening at quarterback and some new development, I guess. I mean, it's a minor thing where Ty Simpson, the top 100 quarterback that they offered out of Martin, Tennessee earlier this month, he set a commitment date. Mike, I'll just kind of let you take the floor from there, what you see that to mean for Notre Dame.
Yeah, so I think it's February 19th. Ty Simpson's announcing his
That's right.
commitment. It's probably going to be Alabama or Clemson. Tennessee probably would have landed him if not for all the issues that they have been having. But Notre Dame's probably just a little too late. And I want to kind of maybe debate with Patrick on how Notre Dame has handled quarterback recruiting. But some quick other little tidbits. You have Steve Angeli and Gavin Wimsatt were the first 2 offers for Notre Dame at quarterback. Nothing really too new to report on those guys at this time. Gavin Wimsatt narrowed his recruitment down to 9. Of course, Notre Dame was in that top group, but still nothing really to write home about either Angeli or Wimsatt right now. It does seem like quarterback recruiting is really heating up for Notre Dame. 2 names to keep an eye on moving forward. Drew Allar from Medina, Ohio. He's picked up offers from Texas A&M, Michigan, and Penn State just here in the past few days. He was kind of like a fringe P5 guy going into his junior season, and then really balled this past fall, and now is picking up all these major Power 5 offers. So he's one to keep an eye on. And then MJ Morris from Atlanta Pace Academy threw touchdown passes to Jaden Thomas, Irish receiver signing in the 2021 class. this past fall. He's also someone to keep an eye on. So if they offer Allar, they would still be pretty early in the game, considering he's just now kind of blowing up. But Morris is kind of like Simpson in that his recruiting process has been going on for a couple years. So you'd be a little bit later to the game. But Pace Academy is a fantastic school. Morris is a really high academic kid, connection with Jaden Thomas. So, there could be some things that could go into Notre Dame's favor with Morris, but I mean, I would have to imagine he would stay in the South. So, right now, I think Notre Dame fans should, keep an eye on Drew Allar, especially as a potential quarterback offer going forward. Okay, but like I mentioned, Patrick, I feel like we've been kind of, with some of our subscribers at BlueandGold.com, been interacting with recently, having the discussion / debates of, did Notre Dame kind of botch this 2022 quarterback stuff? I mean, the answer is, and you're crazy if you don't agree with me on this, but like you can't 100% know right now, like if Notre Dame has failed. You can disagree with how Notre Dame has handled 2022 quarterback recruiting, but if they go get Drew Allar and he becomes a Heisman finalist, then what are you going to say? Like Notre Dame stunk? Like, because they did it. But I think part of it is more where the debate comes in is, should have they been offering guys and really been more heavy into recruiting several months ago, or do you like that they stayed patient? Because quarterback recruiting, like, you have to see these guys in person to really get a good evaluation on them, because you see only the good throws when you're watching a highlight film, but when you go see them at practice or go watch them in person at a game, you get to see the bad throws. You get to see how they read and react. You get to see what kind of leader they are on the sidelines. There's just a lot more that you get in person. So, I don't know, Patrick, what do you think?
Or I look at it in just specific examples of, all right, like, is this seem wise or does this seem kind of off? I don't really think you can quibble with when and how and who they identified when you look at Stephen Angeli and Gavin Wimsatt. And those guys still got the offers before their junior year. They're well in the mix. Mike, I know you've hinted at it a lot, that your safest bet, if you had to make one right now, I mean, considering you got a FutureCast in for him, is for Stephen Angeli to end up in Notre Dame's 2022 class. But then you can look at like a Ty Simpson and you kind of wonder, like, I mean, what took so long? I mean, like, what did you miss here? And like, yeah, I think there are quibbles here, even in this kind of weird situation where, yeah, you have a big missing piece of quarterback recruiting, because you have to feel good about the guy you're taking, right? This is
Right.
still an important spot where you want to separate like process from results, where, I mean, your process can be good as far as identifying a guy you like really early on that a lot of schools end up liking. You're offering, early on and getting in, starting the recruitment earlier, all that kind of stuff. And he ends up as a top 150 kid. You sign him and he's no good in college. Like, all right, you hit on the wrong guy, but your process was good, right? Just as, you can find a situation where you kind of miss on a couple of guys and have to offer somebody a little later, and maybe he's not quite as highly ranked or whatnot, or heavily pursued as you might have wanted from a quarterback in a class. He ends up being really good. Maybe that process wasn't great and you lucked into it. I guess like both of those are kind of separate outcomes, and I mean, they're both worth mentioning, but ultimately it matters what you it matters more like the guy you get. And this is just the case in recruiting in general. Like, it's not as much who you miss on, it's who you get that can't play. So even though you can certainly look at, like, all right, I have a hard time believing right now that they needed 4 more months to say Ty Simpson can't play, or make sure that he can play, I should say. Uh, that's kind of an important thing that you want to be comfortable with when you're looking at quarterbacks in particular. And I know that's harder to do in this cycle where you can't see kids in full. That's my reaction to it.
All right, here's mine. One, if you're Notre Dame, you knew that you weren't going to have any time to get those in-person evaluations for quite some time. So maybe they were like, all right, let's see junior film and that kind of help us figure that out. Like, let's just wait until, let's get these offers out to Angeli and Wimstat, because we do like them from what we've seen on film, and the kids are like taking videos of them throwing in the backyard and sending it to coaches and all that kind of stuff. So that's one point, but also, like, I don't know, everyone else is offering. So, but other schools have their processes, so I understand. But one thing I want to point out is, like, recruiting is not as black and white as people think it is. It's like, I like to look at it from the Drew Pine effect, right? So Drew Pine had in middle school, was picking up offers from Alabama and Jimbo Fisher at Florida State, and all this stuff, and it's like, wow, like this kid is the next big time thing. Ranked as high as the number 37 in Rivals, had all of the offers, ranked very high. Notre Dame goes and gets him. It's like, we finally have the guy. He's ranked high, check. He's got all the offers, check. State champion, check. Great stats, check. Fast forward to today, Notre Dame fans are not even that excited about him anymore. It's like, well, you like, this is what you guys wanted, like a highly ranked kid with all the offer lists. Like, that's what you guys tell me is what's important. And so, but they're kind of off the Drew Pine bandwagon. So, the recruiting is just a little bit more of a crapshoot than okay, this kid's got an Alabama offer, great, then he's good, or oh, he's ranked top 100, well, then he must be very good. Like, sometimes those kids don't pan out, and then the 3 stars do pan out. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But all right, I think we're off on a tangent. If we go much longer, Patrick will start talking about Will Shipley again.
Yeah, I think that's a sign that no, we're good. But like you mentioned with Drew Pine, that's a process versus outcome kind of situation. It's hard not to like the process, right? I mean, we'll see what he does in the rest of his career here. But yeah, just a lot of moving parts with this one. And yeah, like you said, I think it's worth mentioning. Everybody's got to deal with this. Everybody's got to deal with not having in-person evaluations. So you just got to make it work and feel as confident as you can. I would have been. I think that's, if you want to use that as a criticism point with Notre Dame and just how late they were, and even offering the 2 guys in the summer, that's fine. I mean, granted, yeah, still got those 2 offers in the summer, but still only 2 guys at that point. But yeah, I mean, at some point you have to adapt and just kind of, everybody's in the same boat here. It's the 2021 and recruiting cycle, or 2022 early stages. It's just going to be weird, considering the situation. But yeah, let's wrap it up there, Mike, and get out of here. We hope a happy late signing day. I guess it's not even a thing you say anymore. But anyway, if Logan Diggs, of course, the main thing to follow there. We'll see what he does. 4:30 Eastern, I believe, on Wednesday. So we will talk to you again next week, discussing whatever Logan Diggs ends up doing and whatever new developments probably happen in quarterback recruiting, and who knows. But until then, take care.